Welcome everyone for this DevSecOps, internship program, cybersecurity internship program. In the last 2 weeks, we have been talking about quite a few things, but the fundamentals, right? The first week we spoke about what is security, what do you mean by cybersecurity, what are the different concepts that we should need to look into that. Those are the things we came into play. It is in the second week we were focusing more from a career perspective. What are the different roles that are present out there? And one of the roles that is very critical in today's is penetration testing. And we also saw how emergence of artificial intelligence is actually having a huge impact on how pen testing is being performed out there. All right, pen testing predominantly is speaking about ethical hacking. Right, we are actually taking that web application or whatever is there and trying to hack into that and trying to compromise all those things that we are able to do all those things out there. And we saw what are the responsibilities and roles and responsibilities going to be there. But one more particular job role that we are seeing it is, the demand for this particular role is increasing significantly. More companies are moving towards cybersecurity, and for development team who are moving towards DevOps, they're also moving towards a particular role called DevSecOps, right? So in this lecture today, we'll see about what do you mean by DevOps, right? Why there's a need for a DevOps, okay? And what are the issues with the DevOps operations from a security perspective? What are the challenges we are facing out there? And we look into that and we'll see how DevSecOps plays a very important role in bringing the security or increasing the security for us. Okay. DevSecOps is very important. It has a huge impact on the way things carries out. We will look into that, right? And why probably we'll also look into them from a career perspective. What is your job roles and things when you go into the DevSecOps roles out there, right? Let's dive into this. All right. So one second. So next week we'll be talking about cloud security. If you have attended our previous sessions in cloud security, probably we'll be adding more content into that in the next week and something more relevant into that. Yeah. So please look out. Please join next week as well. So this is the current third week, and we'll be looking to DevSecOps. So what do you mean by DevOps? Before going into DevSecOps, because without DevOps, there will be no DevSecOps, right? Same thing is going to be there. So what do you mean by DevOps? DevOps can be explained as a people working together to conceive, build, and deliver software, secure software at top speed. DevOps particularly enables software development and operations teams to accelerate delivery throughout automation, collaboration, fast feedback, and iterative movements. All right. And stemming from agile approach to software development, a DevOps process expands a cross-functional approach of building and shipping application in a faster and more iterative manner, right? So I read through this. This is actually what we call as a definition of DevOps. But what happens in real time, right? What happens in real time? How is this particular DevOps came into play? So traditionally, we have to look, see, DevOps has been there is not much for not long out there. I think if you actually go and check out number of people who are having more than 78 years experience, hands-on experience in DevOps will be very less. There may be people with 15, 20 years experience who are working in DevOps, but they wouldn't have worked in DevOps for the last 15, 20 years, right? A DevOps in terms of IT lifecycle, it is a fairly new uh, architecture. But why it came into existence, right? What was the need for that? So there are multiple reasons that comes into play. DevOps is not a set of steps, all right, not a set particular, it is not inclined to a particular technology. It, in a way, we can tell it is a way of software development, way of life and certain approaches to them. So it is not mandatory to have a CI/CD pipeline, but it is not mandatory to have a Docker's containers or anything. Meaning, we do. It is important to use these tools, but the conceptual perspective it is not that part, right? So we need to understand what DevOps came into existence. So earlier there was something called as a software development lifecycle model that was used for waterfall model. During this time, right? If you take 15, 20 years back, there were very little small applications, and there were also the development rate was very limited, right? Today, if you see, the regularly used website keeps on changing quite constantly based on the season and what are the other requirements, business requirements. But in earlier times, we saw the software development or applications were used for core applications like banking, financial sectors, insurance. And in those situations, the requirements for the application remain constant, right? So meaning requirements can be anything. I need a screen, I need it to calculate. Let's say if you're having a bank cashier application of that, right? It's a simple, right? One of the components of banking is cashier. So that person has to log in, the cashier has to log in. When someone submits a check or some other documentation to receive the cash, he's supposed to verify that. Once that is verified, is supposed to update in the database that particular amount was withdrawn from this particular account. And after he gets in status for that, and then he can give the cash to that person out there. So this is the requirement. During the waterfall model, what used to happen is that we used to not get a lot of requirements, meaning they used to take the requirements first, then they used to design the application, then write the code for that, and then going to test the application for that. Right? Once everything goes fine, they are going to distribute, then they are going to launch their application, or we can tell in an IT terms, put it into production environment, right? But this entire process, what happens is that it takes about on an average between 4 to 6 months, or sometimes even more than that. Sometimes even more than that. But this is totally fine. And I mean, for me, a lot of people tell is that this particular model is waste or not useful, and that particular model is better and things like that. For me, there is no bad model. It is just that we have to choose the right model for the situation, right? So even if you take in the automobile, there will be no bad car or right car out there. The concept was right. And a sports car may be good when you're driving in the racetrack or on the highway, but when it comes to in the in your farming things, and the tractor makes more sense, right? Or large tractors makes more sense out there. So we just need to understand which is the right tool for that. And when you saw, right around 2000, and after that, there was slowly started people started buying things online, and the social interaction over internet grew significantly, right? Nowadays we do almost all everything. You can look at the calendar, you can set up your mail, and everything is going to be online out there. So now what happened was, because of this rapid growth, right, the requirement keeps on changing, right? Let's say think about an Amazon website, right? You have, based on the season, or based on the, let's say if you take it up in India, it is always going to change based on the season, festival, and things like that. And sometimes even based on the what is supposed to be displayed, it is constantly changing based on the that particular user interest. Sometimes it is going to be based on the particular local traditions. It is going to make modifications to search results and everything. So there's a constant change of requirements. If we go with a traditional approach, right, when you take a large set of requirements and then you try to finish it in 6 months' time, by the time the product comes into play, the requirement is no longer valid, right? Let's say if we are doing something in a Christmas time, in the December month, the amount of sales and the amount of offers they're providing, the look and feel of the application is supposed to be good out there. If something goes wrong, it's in there. If it goes, the deadline goes beyond a month, right? It does not make sense at all. Here, not only the coding is going to be affected, the business is going to be affected significantly. The loss from a business perspective will be very high, right? So they had to move away from a waterfall model, because they assumed, they started feeling by the time they finished the requirements, it was going to be very difficult. Okay, so then they came into agile methodology, where it was reduced. What they told was, instead of taking 20 or 40 or 50 requirements, let's take 4 to 5 requirements, try to work on it, and based on how the feedback we are getting from the client, probably we can make modification or add requirements to that. And this is basically, it will go on for a 30-day or a 15-day process. And this, the failure or problems in the product was identified much earlier. Yeah. So now the issue here was still there was the time taken was more. The main reason is the testing team, the development team were not interacting out here, right? And that is where it came into an issue of that. So they wanted to reduce this time. And this is when the cloud started coming into play. And the virtualization technology all came into play. And the synergy of it, when we're using a lot of tools and the way we are using it, is what makes DevOps, right? Previously, if you are having a development server, one would be running on Windows, one would be running on Linux, and one would be running on Windows Server 2022 or something like that. So the way the code used to behave in each of the phases was different. And when it goes into production, again, you had to make some modifications out there. It was not a smooth operation. But when it comes, we got virtualization and Docker containers, all the people could be using a similar image and they could have no issues with that and reduces the impact, business impact as well. So now DevOps, people started using DevOps, right? And again, lot of things could be automated in DevOps. The CI/CD pipeline is what? Is just that, you know, trying to automate the process, trying to automate the process. Let's say if you want to get one code to production, right? Get one code to production, you have to manually build the Docker container, then push it to get the code from GitHub, then build the container, then push that to Docker Hub, then push it to production. All those things is going to be repeated task, and human time, it is always going to be very expensive. The technical amount, your salaries, the operations cost, people don't really know, can be significant, right? So when you automate it, two things you are reducing. The human error factor is also removed. At the same time, time wasted by a human on doing the day-to-day activities is also removed out here. So that is where DevOps came into play. But there are certain restrictions with the DevOps. Right. So what are those restrictions when it comes to security challenges? Right. The problem was in the we have to check out the speed was a security, because if we increase the speed of development phase and things, somewhere down the line we are reducing the security, and if you're increasing the security, the speed is going to be compromised, right? See here in this situation, there are different phases of security, right? One is the code analysis, one is the running a dynamic assessment testing, static assessment testing, then looking at a lot of other things and pen testing as well. So during this phase, the DevOps has to stop and they have to go with that process, right? So now if you remove this to increase the speed, the security is going to be compromised, right? That is one issue. Automation of vulnerability detection is a major issue, right? Because as I told, every time there is an change, it is mandatory requirement to check for security issues, right? So there are times when you are pen testing, we look at the client every time, we go back to them and tell any changes they make, they come to us and ask us to pen test the application once again for the at least for the features that has been added, and we check there is in the new feature there is no new bugs introduced. So this is you have to consider here is that I've already tested the application. I've already told that application is secure. All the bugs are fixed. But it does not mean that it is all the bugs will remain fixed, because as a developer keep on making changes to that, in the new changes, it is a very possibility that a new vulnerabilities could be introduced. Not only that, if you are using a particular operating system for running a website, it is also possible this one website, this operating system could have new vulnerabilities introduced, right? So it is also have to check out for this thing. So how do we automate this, right? And how do we integrate security integration, right? How do we, because it is when we look into DevOps, the tool set, right? We, whenever there's a particular course, we are usually talking about 4 to 5 different tool sets out there. But in reality, the amount of tool sets that are available out there, it's huge, right? How do we make sure that which tool is important, which tool is right, and then how we are going to understand which, how do we integrate these tools with our cybersecurity, right? So that is very much important on that. Right. So one more major problem is insufficient security skills, right? One of the reasons, one of the reasons why we'll see later that the major, there is a huge demand for cybersecurity roles in today, even when there is a lot of downsizing is happening. We are not seeing security teams being cut because they're already being stretched out, right? It is very difficult to get a good quality cybersecurity engineers into the team out there. And there was a situation when there was a 1:1,000 ratio difference between developers and pen testers, meaning in the early stages, if for every 1,000 developers, there was only one pen tester. So amount of projects a pen tester could work was limited, and it became a huge issue, right? And it is not easy to upskill someone into security. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of issues that comes into play as well, right? One more thing is cultural shift. What do you mean by cultural shift here, right? So what do you mean by cultural shift? Think about, today we are talking about a lot about security, right? And I'll tell you, most of the time when we're working with developers, they prefer, there's a reluctance towards working on security. The main reason being is that uh, they have to redo a lot of things. They have to redesign or anything, and their approach is going to be completely changed. Especially when we talk about senior developers who have been working in the industry, the way they approach, way they design the code is for the application to be performed exceptionally well under the whatever the circumstances that is going to be there, right? And the way their design approach is completely different. But when we put security into the design scenario, it changes, right? So for instance, think about someone, right? Think about someone who has been driving the car for a long time and has not been using seat belts. And all of a sudden we come and tell him that they have to use not only normal seat belts, probably a racing seat belts, which has much more number of belts out there. And we are going to probably ask him to wear an helmet and a fireproof jacket as well while driving the car, right? So for his own security, we're going to put that, but it is going to significantly affect his performance because he's not able to adapt to the new process, right? So this is what also some of the things we have to, the problems they face in DevOps as well, right? And technical depth is also one thing. When we're talking about integrating tools into DevSecOps, when we talk about understanding this DevSecOps rules, security tools gives out a lot of reports and stuff out there, right? And we need to have the technical depth to understand what exactly it is going to be. And it is going to be very difficult for developers to understand, or the team, whichever is the operations team also are going to have issues, right? People are running servers and things and all. Whenever we are pen testing, about 50 to 60% of the cases, if the development team is new to security, they have not worked with us previously, almost certainly we have to sit with them and explain what that particular vulnerability it is and why it is important to fix it and what is the critical level that is going to be there. We have to tell them which is a priority, which there will be multiple bugs out there, right? Multiple vulnerabilities. We have to tell them which is the priority. They have to understand those things. So again, there is a lack of technical depth. Okay. So how do we how do we overcome the security challenges, right? How do we overcome the security challenges? First thing, incorporate security from the earlier stage of development cycle, thus reducing the chances of late stage vulnerabilities. Think about, there was one application. Okay. Uh, what happened was there was a gaming website. They were using cryptocurrency for for betting and things like in that company, in that website, and they launched, right. Within the first half an hour, they lost around $40,000, and they shut down the website. Right. So when they came to us, they said something is wrong. We are losing money. I don't know where it's happening, and we are seeing the couple of players are winning on every move. And that should not supposed to happen out there. Meaning, if you're having a roulette or if you're telling choose one of the doors and a lot of other arcade-based games, the chances of winning every single time is going to be less. And they also saw that it is very fast. Within a minute they are winning three times or something like. They were suspicious about it, and they came to us. You know, so we analyzed it and we gave them there's a problem here. The problem here was complete redesigning was required. The way they have set up the application, there was no mitigation. There was no patch or fix that could be done temporarily so that they have the time for through that part, right? So, so they had to shut down that website completely, and they actually kind of went out of business for a couple of months. And when they relaunched after redesigning the application, they lost the user base. They had to redo a lot of things because they had taken months to build that user base, and the user lost trust into that. And this happened because they never thought about security, and they only thought about security after the application was developed. Okay, so that's the major issue. So it is important to shift left, meaning try to implement security at an earlier stage. I'm talking about during the design phase itself, during the requirement phase itself. So you need to collect information about that, right? That is very much important, right? So we have to tell, okay, if there's a login page, what should be the password length? Setting a password length is important, and that is also security consideration, right? After how many failed attempts the user is supposed to be logged, that is also a security consideration, right? And how often you're supposed to change your password, that is also security consideration. There are a lot of other technical things that we need to look just for the login page and forgot password page. I think there are about 20 different security measures that need to be put into place for that to happen. Not that, right? So it keeps on changing based on the application. A lot of things that comes into play, right? That is important. During the design phase only we implement it. Even the developers will be reluctant because it changes that the coding process and things. When you have it in the design phase and the requirement phase itself, they will build application based on that, and it will be a better application, right? The performance in terms of how it's going to function, it will be much more reliable because you're not making changes to cover up bugs at a later stage. You're resolving the bugs at an earlier stage itself. Right. Second point is that security as a code. Right. Implementing security as code itself, enabling automatic enforcement of security policy. It can be in multiple ways. One thing is looking at the source code itself, checking out is there any issues at the source code level, some problem is there. Looking at the configurations at an earlier stage itself, and there should be some kind of an automatic enforcement. This should be there. Without doing this, we cannot go further. Right? That is the thing about security policies also. Right? And continuous security. Integrate continuous security monitoring testing into the DevOps pipeline. So you might have seen if you have attended DevSecOps class, DevOps pipeline is a continuous approach, right? So you're going to get the code, you're going to build the application, then you're going to launch the application, and that keeps on changing every time when there's a modification that is going to be there. At the same time, there's also tools like Prometheus and things like that which help us monitor the DevOps pipeline health on a continuous way. Similarly, we need to implement some kind of a security measure where it will monitor the security of those devices here as well, right? So is it any attack is being done? Is DOS attack is being done on it? Or is there any kind of an WAF enabled it? What's the logs coming out of it? And we need to have the testing also to be done in a very regular way, right? Consistently look into that part. That is what we have to take into consideration. Training and awareness, equipping your team with necessary security skill awareness, right? Fostering culture of safe security, shared security responsibilities. And this is something very important that we don't give a lot of importance to, right? We see when we talk about security training awareness with our clients, what they would ask us is to give us a basic security awareness program, right? They think talking about what is a phishing attack. So what do you mean by other types of on a regular day, what a normal user or a normal person is subjected to, right? It could be password, it could be HTTPS and things like that. They talk about that and they want to continue with that process, and that is excellent. That is a mandatory requirement for everyone in the company. But when it comes to your technical team, there should be much more specialized training in cybersecurity for this specific teams as well, right? So we do reach out to the customers and tell them, see, for the developers, you need to understand, we need to show them what is a web application pen testing. You need to take up these courses, understand, give them, right, and make them understand how does an hacker get into their application? What are the measures they can be put out there? Because once they understand that part, they'll be able to better protect the application. Similarly, for operations teams, we can tell how the operating systems are configured or services are configured. If it is done in an insecure way, how it will give access to the hacker out there, and we have to look into that part as well. Giving training them in giving a web application hacking training for operations teams makes less sense because they never work on it. But giving them security training on how to harden, the Linux or the services, hardening meaning how to make it more secure. So making it harder so it does not break, right? So it has to be customized, that we need to look into place of that, right? So let's talk about, say,
So, Karthik,
yes.
sorry, there was a question from Priyam saying, "What
Okay.
is security as a code? Is it fixing bugs in a software application?"
Yes, security as a security, the code itself. So meaning, you can talk about software, secure code analytics that comes into play. SonarCube or Fortinet is one of the tools that can be used. It will check for any security vulnerabilities in the code level itself. Okay. So we can tell that, okay, this code is having some vulnerability. Let's not put it to production or into deployment. Let's come back and fix this code and then continue with that part. So these tools will be able to identify, is there any security
Oh,
issues? Yes. Yeah. I hope that was clear. You want any more clarification, guys? Any more questions? Devis, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Anyone else is having any more questions, guys?
Okay, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions if you wanted to ask.
Sir, Mirza here.
Yes,
So I
Mr.
have a question related to what type of security. So I mean, do we have any more scope in the job as compared to the job market here, like security, network security, or cloud security, or any application security, or
Mhm. Yes. So I'll talk about it at the later stage. But to be specifying, DevSecOps comes with a lot of things into that part, right? So one of the things that it does not cover is the network security, right? Basically, if you're going with network security, there you're talking about firewalls. It is predominantly, you'll see, if you're wanting to get into network security, it is predominantly firewalls and VPN management. And how do you troubleshoot all those things, right? And This is probably where network operations team comes into play. Most commonly used firewall or the preferred certification, what we are seeing from a firewall perspective is going to be Palo Alto. Right. You need to focus on networking Cisco certifications, and that the knowledge base is going to be more into that. Predominantly, if you see cybersecurity roles broadly, we can be seen here is one is malware analysis that is going to be there done internally, and second thing is SOC operations, which are quite easily available, and the entry requirement for them is bit less. But again, the salaries are also going to be on the lower end itself for those things because the skill set required for that is not that stringent. When we talk about network security, it again they are also having good packages, and it is difficult to get the certifications, and the stringentness of application processing or hiring is bit high because your network infrastructure is going to be dependent on your skill set, the organization network infrastructure. Let's say if you're not configured the firewall properly, the entire network may go down, you know. So that is there. But once where we are seeing, in both the network security, experience makes into a lot of importance of that. The more experience is required to get into good projects. And again, it takes a bit of time to understand those things. And next role is going to be pen testing role, right? So it basically is about hacking into applications. This is particular role, right? The knowledge is given more importance, and the entry requirement is not as stringent because it is very difficult to find good candidates in penetration testing out there, right? Again, there is a specialization in this. Some people are infrastructure pen testing. They are more into hacking operating systems, networks, and things like that. So they'll have a bit better knowledge about how OS and infrastructure works. And again, the most common job openings in pen testing is going to be web and mobile app hacking, not mobile hacking, mobile app. How do you compromise an app in your mobile and websites as well? That is where it is going to be there. So these were the traditional time, job roles that were there. So nowadays, when we talk about DevSecOps, you are doing much more into that. You're doing pen testing, you're doing a role of a security architect, a lot of things that comes into play, right? And that is what we are going to discuss later. I'll talk about it, you know. So in terms of career perspective, there's a lot of demand for DevSecOps at the moment. Uh, Pen testing, they're asking along with DevSecOps. There are a lot of roles. What they tell is that I know you can do the pipeline, but can you hack that application in the as well? Because what happens is that every time these applications are mandatory requirement that they are hacked by an external entity, right? So they need to go to a consulting company and they will hack that application and give a certificate for them. That is important. But if they wait for that, they are going to get a huge pile of vulnerabilities that can be difficult to fix it. So what the companies or organizations are looking at to have someone internally who is going to work on that project, who is going to test that application for security issues, and so that when it actually goes out for pen testing by an external entity, they are going to find because they are going to be very much skilled into that. But instead of finding like 30, 40 vulnerabilities, it can become brought down to 3 to 4, and that will be quite easy to fix. Right? 30, 40 will take a long time to fix out there. And that we have seen, that works out there. So all those things, your DevSecOps helps you with identifying these bugs and fixing it. And that is what we'll see. And that is where we are seeing, right? A lot of companies, if you go pen testing, it's predominantly consulting approach. But DevSecOps is where large organizations, any big companies, Amazon or anyone, they're looking. So in fact, actually, the DevOps team are getting trained or being pushed to understand DevSecOps so that they can implement the security operations in the CI/CD pipeline. You know, hopefully it was. So any more questions? Okay, so let's continue. So as we spoke earlier, software development life cycle. Predominantly, what is going to happen is that the design, code, test, deploy, and finally we were doing the security testing, right? This is going to be an issue, right? The more earlier you identify, the less cost it is going to be, right? If you identify at the earlier stage itself, at the design stage itself, I think there was some study conducted very long time back. I don't think so. The numbers will be relevant now. So they told like if the security vulnerability is identified at the design stage, it will cost a company $5. At the coding stage, it is identified, it will cost them $50. During testing, they call cost it will cost around $15,000. And if it is done at the production stage, when the application is launched and people are using, it may cost around $50,000 on an average, right? So this was a very, I think it's about 10 years back number. At that time, only for 50,000 was launched. But let's say if it is not identified at all and an hacker finds it, the cost cannot be quantified, right? Cost cannot be quantified. It can have a huge impact. There are a lot of times it has impacted in billions of dollars in sales, right? For instance, I think there was one of the large retail marketing chain in US. They had multiple country operations, and they got bug. They got they got hacked around the month of October, and the news broke. Right. What happened was people got to know about this, and they thought the application, the website they're using for purchasing products is no longer secure. The hack was, I think they did not lose much data, but amount of sales they lost because of it, because it was right around Christmas. People did not purchase their Christmas gifts online or Christmas shopping on that particular website. It affected them hugely in terms of billions of dollars. I think they even closed some of the operations on that, right? So that is how the security, delaying implementing security or identifying vulnerabilities later is going to impact. So meaning when we talk about shift left, so post deployment is right side and pre deployment is left side, right? So that's going to be there. So trying to implement security at the earlier stage. So as a DevSecOps engineer, your not only a job role revolves around having the CI/CD pipeline in play. During the design of the application itself, we are going to sit with the developers and tell them, see, these are the vulnerabilities that are going to be there. So these are the security considerations that has to be done out there, right? That you're going to do, that you're going to work as a security architect or security designer out there and going to give information about that, right? So once you have done with that, next thing you're going to do is the code analysis and testing phase also. You're going to add those security features out there. As we saw, code analysis is going to be static coding analysis of that, right? So that is how it is going to be there. Testing is basically usually when application tested, they're going to test if I'm putting the right data, I'm getting that information or not, all those things. Similarly, the security testing, instead of doing it post deployment, they're going to do the security testing pre deployment, right? Usually, you might be knowing that a lot of applications will not be launched in the production environment directly. They'll be put into a testing environment, and there they're going to check for how the application is functioning the way it's supposed to or not. And this is where we are nowadays doing out there. A lot of our clients, my clients who are interacting, they'll tell Karthik, can you test out? We are launching the application in 10 days time, but we want to make sure there's no vulnerabilities out there. So we go in there, we test applications. And since we have worked with those clients already, they also have an internal team. They would have fixed a lot of vulnerabilities. There will be a couple of things we'll find and we'll highlight them and they'll fix it and before launching it, right? And in the 10 days time is more than sufficient for us to get that low vulnerability count fixed and redone again. So that's the advantage doing it in an earlier stage, because once it goes into production, you have no idea what is going to happen out there, right? So, right. So what is DevOps, right? is an evolutionary leap in software development. Its approach integrates security principles, practices, tools in DevOps. It's aimed to make everyone involved in a project accountable for security to implement security decision action at the same scale and speed as development, operations, and decision actions. Right. So just like there was a cultural shift when DevOps came into play, DevSecOps is also a cultural shift, right? We are adding more things into the basket. More people are getting involved here, and almost everyone is going to be responsible for security, right? From day one. It is not that everyone worked on application and once pen testing was done, they used to come back and they used to fix it. But security was not a day-to-day activity for them. But nowadays that is not the case, right? So that is going to be how it is going to change out there, right? And again, traditional emphasis collaboration between developer and operational personals. In DevOps, security is added to this mix. Creating a seamless integration of process enhances the system resilience and reliability. This shift left in security measure ensures that security is considered from the beginning of the software life cycle rather than being an afterthought, as we have spoken already. So adding security makes it more reliable at an earlier stage. DevOps and DevSecOps, their main goal is to remove different teams out of the silo. Traditionally, the different teams were not interacting on a regular basis and they were only going to be active during their phase of the work, right? The testing team were never involved with development team and things like that. Same thing happened with security as well. So, but both DevOps and DevSecOps make sure that all the activities people are involved more and they are more interacting, and that is why you see agile. There's an entire all the teams are interacting. Jira is going to help you out with the ticketing, so everyone will have access to what ticket is open and things like that. Now, that is very much important. So why is that we need to have security, DevSecOps, and how it's going to be useful? By integrating security from start, potential vulnerabilities are identified and addressed earlier. This, as I told, in certain situations, uh, it is going to be very important. There was one more application I was working for a banking, and that particular application was meant to be run on iPad only and iPad Professional Pro itself. That is meant for that, and that is meant for a very senior, guys, executives who go and interact with their clients, where they can show them the options for what is happening with them. Okay. Uh, Again, there's this particular requirement for this clients. Unless until they have around $10 million or some amount of money deposited in the bank, they're not going to be there. So every day, this application had a severe vulnerability. We flagged it. We told we cannot launch the application. Right? It became very important for them, difficult for them. So because every day they lose that money, the investment money, because this is going to be in huge numbers. The rich, very rich clients are going to delay investing the money, and probably they might invest in some other place than investing in that particular bank, and that became an issue. And so it is if they had identified security issues at an earlier stage, if they had implemented security earlier, they would not have lost so much business, right? For even a 10 days loss, delay in launching the application has a huge financial implication, not only from a security perspective, from an business perspective as well. Right. So cost effective rectifying security issues later in the development cycle can be expensive. DevOps mitigate this cost. So think about, and this has happened for us, we see with the client, when the application is production and we go and tell them this vulnerability is there, and we tell this application vulnerability is there in the entire application, right? For I think we saw there was a cross-site scripting attack available, and that was there in the entire application. It's a large, and now they have to fix it. and they're having 40,000 lines of code in that application already. And now they have to go back and see where those things are there, and they have to fix it each and everywhere out there. That is going to be a huge task, right? The cost of the project significantly went up because more time the designers and developers are going to work on same piece of code, right? So if they have identified that vulnerability, XSS attack is a very common vulnerability. It is not a critical, very difficult to know vulnerability or anything. It's very common. They could have just implemented some very basic input validation. They did not do that. That's going to be there as well, right? Then again, I'm talking about speed. Again, as I told you, right? When we identify vulnerabilities, the the vulnerable application cannot be launched. It is going to delivery timeline is going to be increased, and that's going to be a problem. There are cases, there are cases where we have tested the application and we found that vulnerability, and it has to be immediately stopped. The application has to be stopped, especially in the banking sector, because the KYC information was not secure, and they had to take that decision. They take about 10 days to fix it. And I think for that particular one got fixed in 3 to 4 days. But going and telling the customer you can't access that particular facility for 3 days is very important, very difficult for them. Right? Entire application was not down, but that particular feature was down, meaning no new customers were able to be enrolled, or they could not give out any new uh, services, add customers to any new services to that. That becomes an issue. So it takes add more time to the delivery timeline also. Collaboration enhances collaboration between development, operation, security team lead to more resilient software solution. This will help here since the security team is interacting with the operations and development team at an earlier stage. DevSec focus forces them to be more interactive. So there's better understanding, and indeed it is going to be a better application that is being developed out there. All right. So before we go to CI/CD pipeline and things like that, do you guys have any questions till now for the? Any questions?
Yes, I have question.
Yeah, please.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, please ask.
Okay, Wisdom from Nigeria.
Okay.
It was when we were talking about the DevSecOps.
Correct.
So you said something in the process that you have to work with developers to be able to understand the codes and everything. So my question is, as a DevSecOps professional, is it also important to also know how to program or write codes?
No.
Because if you don't know how to do that, how are you going to understand the codes and get error in the process or vulnerability to be able to identify vulnerability in the process?
Yes.
When you are working with developers.
Correct. So predominantly that comes into play is that it will be from a functionality perspective, right? So from a coding perspective, what is going to happen is that you need to be, I would suggest from if you want to be able to do threat analysis, the coding is not required, but having an understanding of what vulnerabilities are there and how that vulnerabilities are impacting the code, that is important out there. So let's assume there's a forgot password page. Every developer will have their own process of doing it about there. But we have to tell them these are the things that is going to happen out there, right? So when we talk about, let's say forgot password page, I can do whenever you put your email in the forgot password and you'll get an email, right? What if I can send that request 1,000 times? At that time, you're going to be your inbox going to be filled with 1,000 emails for forgot password link, right? So for that,
Okay.
you're going to tell that, okay, tell the development team and the operations team, if I'm getting more than 4 requests per minute from a particular client, block that client. How they're going to do it, it is their responsibility. Right?
Okay.
So that is the thing. So again, same thing for the password policy. We have to tell them, see this, a password of 8 character length can be broken in 45 days time. And that is the reason we have to implement the password needs to change once in 30 days. But how they are going to implement that is going to change. One more reason why it is not mandatory is that to know have a coding perspective, it will help. I'm not telling you should not learn coding. It will have a
Okay.
better impact for you. You'll be in a much more uh, better position. The pay wise, if you know development, is going to be much higher than someone without knowing that. But one more issue is that you're going to work with a lot of teams. And one team will be working on Python, the other team will be working on .NET, other team is going to work on PHP. Do you think you can be a good developer, coding fine expert in all of them? And then again on top of that be good in security, the chances of it is very very less, right? The most of us will not be able to do that part. And again, security is a completely constantly evolving subject. So there's new vulnerabilities we have to understand, then again we have to implement security into that. So you are going to be more like from an, you will, you should have a pen testing ability, right? If you want, that is what is required of them. And again, you will have an understanding of how to increase the tool set, right? So what I have seen, usually organizations tell that you should be able to identify all the vulnerabilities. The DevSecOps team should be able to do that process. In reality, what I've seen is that they predominantly work towards getting closing lot of critical bugs which are easy to identify, and 1 second, sorry, which are easy to identify and reduce the impact as much as possible, because the DevSecOps teams are going to be involved in pen testing, but they don't specialize in that. So they are someone, you can tell them is jack of all trades, what I have seen, right? So they will be able to build the CI/CD pipeline, they'll be able to do pen testing, they'll be able to do threat analysis and things like that. What do you mean by critical bug? Is that something which can be easily hacked and that can be done fixed difficult? You know, the impact, the data loss is going to be high. If the data loss is high, but it takes a lot of more complex behavior. For instance, someone need to be inside the building, physically have access to the server to steal the data. That will not be critical. It will be much lower than that. But someone who can access the website anywhere in the world and steal the data, that is critical. Those are the things the DevSecOps engineers will be able to identify. Right. So it is not mandatory, right, to understand from a coding perspective. There is a certain set of development DevSecOps teams where they ask you to do code analysis, right? They want someone to open up the code, open up the GitHub and look at the code and see what is the security vulnerability out there. That is going to be there. So, but that is going to be on a difficulty rating is going to be quite high. Yeah. Because we have seen a lot of our students have reached out, a lot of interviews, and they do face those kind of, but it is not mandatory. That's what I would say.
Okay, very clear. Sorry,
Yeah.
like from the kind of a roll up from last week when you were teaching us pen test and some other things. There was another
Yeah.
question that came to my mind when I was watching the video. It has to do with the body that provide this training for cybersecurity professionals. Like the ISC2 EC Council. I'm realizing that like the ISC, they don't teach pen testing.
Yes.
And EC2 teach pen testing. So my question is it every cybersecurity professional that will have the knowledge of pen testing? Because ISC2 is a very big body recognized all over the world. They don't do that. And some of their certification is highly respected. So is it
Yes.
compulsory or very important that every cybersecurity professional
Yeah.
have ability to do pen testing?
Yes. So let's say uh, you're an house architect, right? You know how to build, you can draw plans for how to build a house and things like that. So what is the requirement for you to be able to, how do you mix cement and build, make mortar, and how do you can put the bricks and everything? Chances of doing it, that is very less, right? And probably you may not know also. ISC 2 is predominantly the way their certifications are focused are towards management roles, right? So that is the reason when we talk about especially CISP, which has about 4 years work experience in cybersecurity as a mandatory requirement, you see any of those certifications, they're predominantly more into what we call it as an inch depth, but mile wide. So meaning when it comes to technical depth, there's very little technical depth in ISC 2 certifications, but number of domains covered by them is very high. Okay. So let's say you're an architect or a manager working with many different teams. You need to have an understanding, are able to tell people what has to be done. This is the security measures that need to be done out there. But it is the technician's responsibility to put up in that place, right? And again, why pen testing is not mandatory is that because ISC2 also talks about physical security also. If you're keeping a server in a particular place, you have to have a particular lock. It should have a CCTV and coverage checking.
Yeah.
And again, there should be an attendance for who is accessing those server out there. So they cover a lot of things. If you're in a someone with 70, 80 years experience or 5 years experience in cybersecurity, and you are looking into move into management role, ISC2 certifications are a good way to go. Uh,
Okay.
when we see IEC2 certifications, those are certifications are good for you to get an interview in that particular domain, right? So when you're talking about CH certification, Certified Ethical Hacker in EC2, in EC Council, they will give us, if you are certified ethical hacker, we will give a interview for that. It will introduce you to the art of pen testing, but it will not make you an expert in pen testing on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the way I see both the certifications. Uh, when I'm hiring for technical roles, right? I'm hiring for pen testers, I never CISP is not in my list at all. I would probably look with CH or OSCP certification and things like that. And again, think from a career perspective. If you're going to start as a pen tester, right? As a developer, what you're going to happen is that you're going to be a junior developer, then a developer, senior developer, then you're going to be lead, then you're going to move into architect. Right? When it comes to pen testing, you don't see that approach, right? You start off, right? Approximately when you do about 40 to 50 applications, you come down to the same level as any other guy out there. But after that, you either have to decide in two ways, either to go into the manager role for the pen testing team or moving into a DevSecOps role where you're dealing as an architect and helping the team with designing the application from a security perspective, right? So you move again into a development environment itself. You are otherwise you're going to be doing the same pen testing activity for a long time. That expertise is important. The way you go into pen test application, the impact and the pay scales are going to be different. But from a career growth perspective, this is what I'm telling. This is what it looks like.
Okay. Thank you very
So,
much.
yeah,
So Karthik, here I would like to add one more note.
yeah,
So
please.
wisdom, right? So wisdom here, what we have trying to achieve, we have two courses for cybersecurity or GRC. One is our paid, one is free. So the paid course we could normally call is a job ready training. The main agenda was to create a hands-on training by which newcomers, freshers, or those people who want to try to switch their domain, they can be ready within 6 7 weeks and get the job. And we research a lot about the job market, and we found, and it was quite successful for us as well, that many students, they don't had any idea about even IT, forget about cybersecurity. After the course they can successfully land on a job. Now if you go to the LinkedIn, that thing I am always trying to convey this message every uh, session. If you search for pen tester or DevSecOps engineer or cloud security engineer, you will find that there are many jobs they are open and for couple of months, and they could not find a good person. So right now in the job market, this like container security, cloud security, DevSecOps engineer and pen tester, demand is very high, and we can prepare you within 6 or 7 weeks. But if you know, GRC itself a huge thing, governance, compliance, and other auditors, other things also there. As Mr. Kartik has mentioned, you can do, but then it will take much more time. We cannot complete that thing in 6 weeks. So our things is, our course was designed that people can achieve their goal, land on a job within 6 7 training. Once they are on the job, then they can go for their management level of certification. Right, Mr. Kartik?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Thank you very much. I get it very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let's continue, right? So when we are talking about DevSecOps, right, it is not mandatory that CI/CD pipeline needs to be there, right? If I'm doing the different stages and things like that, it is going to take more time, that's for sure. But at the development stage itself, I'm going to do these important activities. That's going to be present out there. But CI/CD pipeline is actually used to make the task much more faster and reduce the financial constraints as well. For instance, think about as a pen tester for a company internal team I'm working out there, I'm not a consultant. So every time there's a code that is going to be made modifications to the website, even if it is a small changes, I have to run a scan. I have to check the code security is good or not. Then I have to run a dynamics test out there. And then I have to check all the components used in this application are good and safe. Then I'm going to finally do a pen testing and vulnerability assessment. But this becomes a huge impact for us, right? From a manual perspective, this can be very difficult. Okay, it's going to take a lot of time, even so, right? Usually, for the same reasons, pen testing and vulnerability assessment is not conducted quite often. They usually are moved to once in a quarter, or once in 6 months, or once in a year. And I think best case we have seen is that it is going to be done once in a month, right? But other cases, we still be running other scans on this application. What CI/CD pipeline able to do this is automate this process, right? This CI/CD pipeline, as soon as there's a code changes made to the GitHub, it is going to check for this code analysis. It's going to check any issues there in the code from a security perspective. And after that, it is going to build a container, and then it is going to check, right? Is there going to run some dynamic test on the application? It is going to check for any vulnerabilities that are there in the application. And once that is done, it is going to do a software composition analysis. So this is predominantly what we're talking about is there will be a lot of third-party tools used in an application. For instance, it may be an Apache server, it could be Java, jQuery, jQuery UI, or Bootstrap. There's a lot of things that are there. It is going to check whether these third-party components are safe or not, are there vulnerabilities in it or not, right? Again, we also have to check whether the Docker container we are using, it is in a secure way. All these things can be automated, just by clicking a couple of buttons. You can see this is going to be done automatically, and no automation is going to be performed here, and the reports is going to be generated for that. So that is what the CI/CD tool will be able to help you out with a security perspective. And a pen testing, it can be delivered at the late stage, right? There are multiple tools that are there available out there. So in our course, we predominantly are looking at, Sonar Cube, Jenkins, then again, we are also talking about Trevi Scanner for scanning and OWASP, and, Sync also is being used for checking SCA models and things like that. There are multiple tools we are using for different stages of the application to be tested, you know. So that is how that's going to be there. It depends on the organization, which tools that are going to be used, but the process is going to remain the same out here. And we'll be looking at different, how do we approach that, which makes it more useful for us part of it. One more important concept in DevSecOps is threat modeling. As I've been speaking continuously again and again, design phase plays a major requirement and major importance, right? Threat modeling is a family of activities improving security by identifying threats, then define countermeasures to prevent and mitigate the effects threats of a system, right? A threat is a potential actual disobey event that may be malicious, such as docs, or incidental failure of storage. Threat modeling is planned of activities identified, assessing application threats and vulnerabilities. Traditionally, threat modeling was there, but not from a security perspective, right? So why is that? You're going to have two set of hardwares, or there may be two backups that is going to be taken every day. So there's a threat modeling out there that your hardware could fail, and that your all data could be lost. So how do we overcome this issue? Is to take a backup of the data once in every day and keep it in a separate place, right? The banks does do that part, right? They will have separate tape drives where they're going to store the data in a sequential order, and then every day that backup is going to be taken out there. And even if they lose something, they're not losing a lot of data. Only for that particular day, they're going to lose that data out there, right? And even for that, there are multiple checks that is there. So you're not going to test out there. And again, the load balancer also a process of that, right? What if one of the server fails or one of the server gets too much too much request? So what are you going to do? So these are all operation based threat analysis and threat modeling. How do we overcome this issue? And this was there from the beginning. But now we're looking threat from a security perspective as well. First and foremost is we have to know what is security definement. What is the likelihood that threat is going to be there? Okay. So for instance, we have to check it out. Let's give two importance. You might be knowing there are a lot of websites which are providing, disposable email IDs. So you can open that website. They'll give an email ID. If you want to subscribe to some, let's say you want to download something, you are going to give an email ID, so you can use it and download it and forget about that account. Those are called as disposable IDs. Technically, applications should be able to identify such disposable emails and prevent users from registering them via the disposable email IDs. Okay, that is one thing they have to do. And one more thing we can think about is brute forcing of your password. Brute forcing of your password. So someone will try, let's say someone knows your email ID and they don't know the password. They keep on trying different passwords and they might get lucky sometime, right? So now there are two different threats out here. Threat analysis basically is about identify security requirement. What is my security requirement? What is that I need to save, right? And second thing is that what is the likelihood of a threat being mitigated, actually causing an issue, right? Let's say brute forcing attack as a much more likely event of occurring that can actually lead to an account bypass. Whereas a disposable email registration, which is also a security issue, but the impact is very less. Someone might create a fake account in your website, but how are they going to go from there to gaining access to that? Maybe very little chance if it is very little, right? Because you can't give security for everything because you will not have the budget for that, and sometimes it is not required also. So then threat assessment is again we are going to look at that what is going to be the impact, right? There may be a vulnerability. It is going to be compromised. Likelihood of it occurring is very high. What is the threat impact assessment is going to be done, right? So what if the brute forcing can be used to bypass an admin username and password, and the impact is going to be very high because that's a complete compromise of the application. As an admin, you'll have access to everything. So that is there, right? So that is where we are identifying, okay, this is what is impact is going to be there. Then you are going to write a mitigation technique for that. So for brute forcing, there are multiple ways of doing it. If you're adding an admin user password, make sure the password length is 16 character length, and every 3 attempts you should be able to lock the account for 10 or 15 minutes, like that. Sometimes it is possible to lock it for indefinitely. Admin, someone else has to unlock it, but that can be pretty cumbersome when you're in a large organization, right? Because so many people will be entering wrong password, you cannot lock everything. Just like your mobile phone, you enter wrong pin, it will lock 5 times. It will get locked for 5 minutes, right? Only after that, again, you can try other 5 times. In a similar situation, the user ID can be locked for 5-10 minutes. That could also be done. So we're talking about a lot of mitigations, what can be done to prevent a brute force attack. Once that is done, we have to confirm the mitigations are working or not. So how do we do that? We do the hacking part. We do the pen testing out there. We check, we'll try to brute force it is possible or not, because there are cases where they have implemented a security measure, but it is not done properly, right? One of the measures for preventing, unauthorized access is OTP or CAPTCHA. And we have compromised those, both of them as well, right? So there are certain techniques for doing that also. The final concept that we look into is defense in depth. Think about, you have a very important object at your home, and probably you're going to use a safe, iron safe to keep it safe, right? And you're going to put it up there. So if you're going out, since your important component is already in the safe, are you just going to open all the doors and windows and go, or are you going to lock the cupboard which the safe is in, then again lock the room, then again lock all the windows, lock the main door, and finally going out? Probably if you're having a gate, lock the gate and going out, right? Why are you doing that way? The reason is, right, one of the main principles of security is that nothing is safe 100%. If someone wants to steal, they will always find a way to steal out of it. But when you're doing it in such a different way, what is going to happen is that it is going to increase the difficulty for a guy who's trying to steal. Right? He has to do a multi-layer, approach for that. He has to first break the gate layer, then break the main door, then break into the room, then break into the cupboard, then finally only then he'll have access to the safe out there. Right? Adding more layers into this security is always going to be a much more better. Right? For instance, when you see in your real-time environment, uh, before your application, when you send a request to a website, right, before it reaches the actual server, there'll be multiple things in the between, right? First of all, there's going to be a network firewall. After that, there's going to be web application firewall. Then again, there's going to be an antivirus file, because you may be uploading virus into that. For instance, in Gmail, if you upload a virus, it's not going to take. Why? Because there's an antivirus software server running in the background. Then there's a load balancer. Then again, there may be proxy or anything out there. So many things are there that is going to give more security one by one out there. That's the main thing. Security as a code, right? It is involves implementing practice tools, protects source code for vulnerabilities, threats, and attacks. Right? Here, it is not only about who is writing the code, right? Who is writing the code, and is the code written in a safe way? it also deals with about who is having access to the code as well. Right. So when you're having a GitHub code, right, I think probably many of you will be having GitHub. You put up some code out there. Since this is you're a public, since you're not a paid, probably if you're not paying, it is going to be publicly accessible, meaning anyone in the world will be able to look at your code out there. Whereas an organization will actually pay for it and they will have a privacy telling that only that organization will be able to have access to that code. There are cases where we have seen that was a very large financial company. They were dealing with a lot of customer data. The code was put up in GitLabs and it was not secured. So meaning they forgot to keep that particular library as private. So anyone searching for that will have then access to the source code. Right. That is one thing. Code tampering, any changes to the made to the code is not monitored. So you're not seeing who is having access to the code and changes out there and combining the code or making modifications. And that has to be very important. So injection attacks, code repository can be targeted by injecting attacks if not secured correctly. So here code tampering is also comes into play. Here what could be done is that we can actually build up a backdoor into the code where the attacker will be able to gain access for that. And recently we might have seen, right, one of the zip compression tools in Linux which was used for a long time had a backdoor, and only recently it got known that, so they had this it for a very long time, right? And the particular project, I think it was left out. No one continued to use that project, but this particular person took up that project and started adding features to that. While adding features, he also built a backdoor into that, meaning any OS Linux which is running that particular utility, install it is they can access it whenever they want. Yes. And one more thing we have seen is the data exposure. What happens is that your source code will have sometimes hard-coded credentials into that. And if someone gain access to your source code, will also be able to access the credentials as well. So that also we have to be very careful. And sometimes API keys will be there to access that. You have to be very careful who's giving access to that. So again, this is going to be much more from a configuration perspective. We are going to look into that. And this is, you have to have a periodic review for this activity. For instance, let's say there is an employee who was fired or he moved to a different company, got a better offer. We have to not only remove his access to the company IT infrastructure, it also has to happen for the code as well. The ID can should also be disabled from that. So we should regularly check who are these having access to this code repository. Are they still part of the organization? And those things has to be taken into consideration. All right. So as we told, access control, pull request review, protected branches. So then again, all those things what we spoke about there. And finally, we're talking about container security. Container security, the problem is that as more and more technology gets infused into your application, more and more attack surfaces comes into play. Right? So previously we're using a physical server. There is only one attack interface out there. Now the containers will be there. Not only now the physical server, again containers also can be used to attack the application. Right? So again, containers can be a potential entry point. Think about someone is having an Ubuntu container. They hack into that, or there's a vulnerability in that Ubuntu container. Such a large hundreds and thousands of applications will be running on Ubuntu Docker container, and all of them will be vulnerable out there. Right? So they may be running a very secure Ubuntu machine server and any other server, but that particular container may be vulnerable out there. So that will introduce vulnerability into that. That is why, as told, vulnerable images, container built on can be introduced security risk into that, as we saw. Running container could be subjected to attacks like process hijacking, privilege escalation, other things. Same thing that could be happening on your regular servers are going to be migrating to the containers as well. It may be running processes that can be used for hijacking. There are certain cases, I think, where they were able to hijack the container and probably hijack the host also where the container was running, right? As we saw, lack of oscillation. Containers on same host share the host OS, leading to lesser degree of isolation compared to VMs. When we're dealing with VMs, right? So it is possible to have a better isolation compared to containers. Containers do share the same hard drive that is there. That could lead to data being dumped or malicious coded being dumped out there, which could be picked up by other containers also. So we have to be careful out there as well. So what are the best practices here? Always use trusted images, right? Either you have to build your own images using trusted components, or if you're using a pre-existing, make sure that you completely aware who is the developer for that and things like that. For instance, even though I told if the Ubuntu will contain any vulnerabilities, you can trust that particular distributor, image, because any vulnerability that is going to be identified, it is going to be fixed immediately and updates are going to be available almost immediately. If a container is coming from an unrecognized developer, I think the fixes may not come that frequently, or even worse, that developer could have added a backdoor into that container. That could be there. And again, we also have to know uh, monitor our container activities for any suspicious behavior. We need to have tools for monitoring that part. That's the requirement. And again, these containers, try avoiding running the containers with root privileges, trying to run with the least privilege available as possible. Regularly update those containers. I think that we don't see that option up there. We are seeing a lot of time people do go access the container at the command level and rebuild, make changes to the code there rather than doing a rebuild and updating with the latest components out there. Don't do that. Update the containers or try to use the latest container once in a while. Implement strong access control. The way you're going to access, password policies and things has to be very high out there. And again, who can access or build containers has to be very restricted. We have to be very careful with this approach, right? In our course, we're using 3V scanner, but there are Anchor and Microscanner, Aqua Microscanner that can be used for scanning the containers also, right? And finally, is the regular training and periodic assessment. We have seen, what we had seen is that not only from a technical perspective, it is also a normal users also should be educated how to identify a threat and overcome that. We did a phishing campaign for one of our clients where we sent out a fake mails so that thinking whether the employees will click on that or not. But this time we didn't have much of success when we did the first time around. So second time around, we try to make it a bit more, challenging. What we did was we the client was not in the same city; he was in a different city. So what we did was we Google searched that client location. We saw where that users are sitting out there, and what we did was we looked out for hotels nearby, restaurants nearby, and we started giving out fake coupons in our email for free meal or a discounted meal and things like that. And amount, people started clicking on the phishing mails significantly went up. And in fact, some of them even gave up their credentials as well because it required a login page where before accessing, please enter your company username and password. It was, a lot of people, they entered their official mail IDs in those links as well just to get that. That is important. Then again, developers have to be trained, and operations team also have to be trained into understanding and identify bugs. Right? Security is not something that is going to end, and there is no start and end. It is a continuous cycle. Right from the design phase, you're going into the implementation, coding, then testing, then again monitoring mode, then again they're going to come back to the design phase because new things is added. And that is why you see DevOps and DevSecOps as an infinite cycle. Right, it keeps on going, it never stops, and it is always continuous. Right, and the training has to be continuous as well. That is what we see. And one of the reasons why we are doing DevSecOps is the importance of this particular job role. And we are seeing more and more because security is going to be, the market value is going to go significantly high, and amount of expenditures on security is going high also. The main reason is that previously we are seeing lot few companies were getting hacked. Nowadays, almost any company we are seeing are getting hacked. We are seeing wherever we are going, whenever interacting with client, one of the reasons why they're coming to us and asking us to help them out is because they got hacked recently. You know, so they are paranoid. They got hacked on their static websites and things. Its website went down, and they don't know that it can migrate to their actual data. They come in a, and that is what is happening. The investment in security is going to go very high, and DevSecOps is an important role that is going to keep on increasing, right? And you will also see the job roles, the salary packages are also increasing in recent time, right? Uh, Cybersecurity consultant, security analyst, pen tester role, and DevSecOps roles also going to be in a. I think we're seeing DevSecOps getting much more higher than cybersecurity and pen testers because they do club pen testing other along with design and other things. So the packages is going to be quite high as well for them. Yeah, and we are seeing the what we are seeing when our students are going out for interviews and what the packages they have been offered, and we understand that it is, basically the more you have pen testing skill set and DevSecOps, the packages is bit higher compared to the other normally coming up with the DevOps. Yeah. So any questions, guys? Any questions about the internship, what we did about DevSecOps or related to job? Do please let us know.
Mr. Karthik, do you
It's
have any
it's
time to showcase that our lab or what we are going to do in our hands-on at training? Can you just showcase what kind of tool or our lab environment?
Just 1 second. I think that lab is not there. I was preparing a new one. Second. Second.
Meanwhile, guys, if you have any question, you can
One,
ask.
yes, just 1 second.
Sure. Because guys, for your information, our this cybersecurity internship free program is only 4 weeks or 4 session. So we do have a limited capacity to go and hands-on. But we are, a little bit ruthless in our job ready training, and the whole training is like a 6 to 7 weeks, and 80% is hands-on. So now I got few messages in our WhatsApp channel that what kind of hands-on we are going to do in our job ready training.
Yeah.
So
Predominantly, what we are going to do is that we are going to work from a Linux perspective. So lot even for the freshers, it is going to be quite easy to start off with. Then we are going to talk about different services, right? We'll talk about how do you set up your web servers, websites, how do you configure SSH services in a secure way, and how do you do FTP and other things we are going to do. And once we are done with that, we'll come to the pen testing part, right? When in the they where we are introducing you to the real-time web application testing, where we actually use an operating system for Kali. This Linux is mainly designed for hacking itself, right? It's mainly designed for hacking itself. Uh, so we'll use different tools here for doing the hacking part, and we'll have a lot of vulnerable machines also where you can practice. It is illegal to practice on real time systems, right? So we have vulnerable machines which is safe to practice your skill set out there, right? And once we are done with that part, again we'll move on to the DevOps part, DevSecOps, where we are using Jenkins pipeline for building our own pipeline and building a simple project, talking about what are the different stages, how do you check out Git and how do you build, scan the code and how do you scan the images, and finally deploying that particular thing out there. All those things will be taken into consideration when we're doing this project out there. And again, the practice that for pen testing, we have got an entire very large application for we are covering a wide variety of vulnerabilities in web application and how to identify that. That is also going to be covered out there, and step by step guide to the DevSecOps pipeline project also is going to be covered out there. Yeah, man, that's it.
Yeah. Guys, do you have any question for us?
So do we have any prerequisite for this one?
If you have a DevOps or cloud knowledge, that will be good to have. And most of our students from our consultancy and our student based out of US and Canada, we always advise them. It is not mandatory that if you are very new on the IT field, try to go for our DevOps training. Once you have the Linux, because in DevOps we do have, after this we have a DevOps free session also. You can join, complete that Linux, cloud and container in-depth knowledge. Then you can go for the how to secure those infrastructure. But if you are very new and you do have a hurry and you can take the pressure by yourself, because we are going to provide you the materials as well. So yeah, you can join as a new freshers in our cybersecurity classes as well.
Yes, but if you come via DevOps, the impact is going to be quite easy to, meaning like you will better understand the amount of time you will have to kill on cybersecurity is going to be significantly less. And again, we have seen people who are coming from DevOps and then moving to security having much more better impact in interviews also. What do I say?
So which cloud is preferable, sir? AWS or Microsoft Azure or GCP?
For DevOps role, I think they go with
AWS.
AWS. Yeah. From a pen testing role perspective, we are not going to be covering cloud out there because it is not legal to hack your cloud services. So we'll set up a real-time environment using virtualization VMware workstation. That will help you set up in your machines as well, where you can practice at your will.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any more question? Okay, guys. So, for your information, those who are looking for our cybersecurity classes, the jobbery training, that is because we can have only 6 evening batches in a year. So our next fall session is going to start in October first week. This as it is, I mention and we mention every time that it is a hands-on training, uh, and this thing happen in our DevOps classes as well. Please remember, we do have a threshold limit. We cannot take a certain number of students in a single batch because we don't want to, make things little hurry. We always like to take some time to doing the thing in the right way. So now this thing happened in our DevOps morning batch, which is started last week. It was full, and after sometimes few students was knocking that and asking to join the classes. But sadly, we cannot do, because if we do, we cannot maintain the integrity of hands-on training. Hands-on training means we have to be available and try to address all of the question which the students have in their mind. We are not that kind of professional that yeah, the time is up and today the session is closed. We don't do in that way. Until unless you are got the people students are on the page where we want them to be, we try to keep them pushing, right? So our cybersecurity classes is going to start I think October first week. Don't wait for the last minute. Maybe there is a high chance that high chance, it's 100% chance that you will miss the chance or miss the boat for October session. Then you need to wait for another at least 2 months for the next session to kick start. Yeah, wisdom.
Sir, could you please share the course contents? That would be helpful for us.
Mirza, it is already in our website, and if you are in the group, we have shared the. Okay, I am sharing here also. Uh, this is the course details in the chat. Okay, I have shared. Just check, and all the course content is mentioned over there. The duration, price, timing, everything more or less there. And to get to complete the task, you need complete the course. You need a Microsoft Team account, because every day's class recording materials, course content, task, project work, everything will be we are going to provide in a secure Microsoft channel. So for that, you should have a Microsoft Teams account, and you should have a good internet and a mid size of computer.